My name is Frederick Winsness, and I'm with the NetHope and the NetHope Solution Center. We're very pleased to welcome you today to another No Lost Generation Tech Task Force webinar. Today, we're going to talk about higher education opportunities for displaced students with IIE Peer. And before we introduce the speakers today, I'm going to go over our customary housekeeping rules. So please keep your lines muted to minimize background noise. We do want to make this interactive, and we'll do question and answer session towards the end of the session today, but I encourage everybody to open up the chat window in the WebEx console and both follow along with questions being posted there and also post your own questions there, and we will facilitate a discussion session towards the end of the hour today. We are also going to point you to a webinar satisfaction poll, so please consider answering that, and I'll be talking about that towards the very, very end of the hour today. And we are recording this, and encourage you to look for a follow-up email with the recording or the link to the webinar posting with the recording and the collateral that's posted on the NetHope Solution Center. And encourage you to share that with colleagues that may not have been able to join us here today. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce Leila Toplik. Leila is with NetHope, and she leads our No Lost Generation Tech Task Force efforts, and she's going to be speaking next. She'll be introducing Catherine Miller from Global Education and Emergencies. She's the Global Education and Emergencies Specialist of the Institute of International Education, or IIE. So Leila, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Good morning and good afternoon. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Frederick, if you could just switch to my slides. So since there are a few new participants, on the next slide, I'll just take a minute to quickly provide a brief overview of the task force and also invite you to sign up if you haven't already, so you could be invited to the future webinars and learn more about resources that we have curated for you. So the task force was set up in March this year by NetHope and the No Lost Generation Initiative with the support from Microsoft to facilitate collaboration between humanitarian agencies, so that includes the UN agencies, global NGOs, local NGOs, and the private sector. So we're connecting experts in refugee response with the private sector expertise and resources to really address the needs of displaced children and youth. And we do that by focusing on cross-sector information sharing, like these webinars. And then we're also doing project-based tech-enabled collaborations with NGOs, private sector companies, and academic institutions. And the membership is open to all of you. On this slide, you see some of the organizations that are participating in task force, again, including UN agencies, local and global NGOs, private sector companies, and academic institutions. I do want to call your attention to the resources we put together and made available to you. They include skills training and educational content from companies like Microsoft, HP, Coursera, Udemy, data sheets, as well as the private sector engagement guide that we published last month in time for the NLG Private Sector Symposium. And the webinar topics are based really on your work and your needs. So I invite you to email me if you have any suggestions. Our next webinar will be scheduled for early November, right after the NetHope Summit, and we'll be featuring the work of World Reader. Now, next slide, please, Frederick. So I'm thrilled to welcome Catherine Miller from the Institute of the International Education. Catherine and I have been talking for the past few months about the right timing to really feature the work that IIE is doing, and specifically Peer program that is an online database of educational opportunities that include university scholarships and grants for online and language learning courses. One thing that I'll note, those of you who have attended the task force webinars in the past will notice that this is a slightly different webinar. We typically have a private sector resource provider like Microsoft or Coursera talk about how they've adapted some of their existing resources like skills training courses, and then their NGO partners would talk about implementation of programs and what they're learning. Well, in this instance, I really wanted to highlight another path to supporting the needs of displaced youth, and specifically by creating a solution from the ground up that addresses specific needs of displaced youth, doing that or scaling that by using technology, and then also aggregating existing resources from many diverse sources. And Catherine will talk more about how you can participate and plug in your resources into this great database. So again, I'm thrilled to have Catherine tell you more about the work, and then we'll take questions at the end of her presentation, but don't hesitate to post them during the presentation. Thank you very much. Catherine, over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Leila. First, before we get started, I just want to introduce very briefly, share a video with you that I think is a good introduction to the rest of the presentation. As Leila mentioned, I am the Global Education Emergency Specialist for the IIE Peer Program. And so without further ado, if you don't mind playing the video. Great, thank you very much. So that is a video we've sent through our social media networks. It gets the word out to students and organizations around the world about the PEER project. But before jumping into all of that, let me start from the beginning. The PEER project was really founded on this idea and displaced by war. And as we know, only 1% have access to higher education. So IIE is the Institute of International Education. We teamed up with another foundation to create the platform for education in emergencies response. IIE is well known for managing the Fulbright program for the U.S. government, as well as about 300 other programs. However, we do have an arm of our organization called IIE Initiatives, and that is where the PEER program. So another word about the database. So the cornerstone of the PEER program is online clearinghouse. What it does is it enables displaced and refugee students to connect with hundreds of educational opportunities around the world. This is really a global project, and by no means, other than managing it from New York, has any certain focus on North America or the U.S. We've really put an emphasis on trying to make this a global project. So the database itself, which I will demo in a moment, has 700 online language opportunities, online language and learning, and also scholarship opportunities. Displaced students. I also just want to say a quick word that I am referring to refugees, those who consider themselves to be displaced or are displaced, and IDPs. So in a blanket way, I will say displaced students. So as I mentioned, there are hundreds of opportunities, and when I say an opportunity in the database, some opportunities represent one scholarship if one university has a scholarship to offer, while others may scholarships to give. So all told, the number of represented scholarships in the PEER database is something in the number well into the thousands. This is a listing of our partners. I won't go into depth here, but we are grateful for all of our founding partners. So as far as the scope goes, the peer project was at first, we have started with reaching out to Syrian displaced students. One of the reasons being that IIE has had a long past of working well within the recent crisis of creating the IIE Syria Consortium, or is a group of over 80 U.S. institutions that agreed to waive tuition for Syrian students in the U.S. That said, it kind of built a foundation for this project now, and as such, given that we had more experience working with this population of students, we have decided to focus only in year one purely on the students from Syria. And again, just to say one more time, this is an initiative for displaced students, and it does not matter in what location those Syrian students might be living. So, needs of displaced refugee youth. We want to leverage technology to collect, catalog, and disseminate existing resources. And we want to unify the efforts of organizations, universities, and businesses helping displaced students around the world. We thought about the project a lot before we launched it, and one of the things that we felt was an area of need is the absolutely overwhelming and disorienting feeling if you're a displaced student. Any student looking for opportunities beyond his or her home, maybe in other countries, maybe in neighboring countries, or even maybe in a home country, might feel disoriented at the sheer volume of scholarships that exist out there. When I did a mock search for scholarship opportunities for refugees, you will see that it returns approximately 18 million results. So in creating the IIE peer database, we really wanted to create a warm and welcoming digital home, if you will. And this is our version of the search, which again, I will demonstrate in just a few moments. A student is able to click on one button that leads to a search function, and then they can search for one of the over 700 opportunities in the database. I'm going to click through the next 3 slides. We have 3 entry points to the site. That is referring, of course, now our target audience, displaced Syrian students. However, just a note, anyone can view these pages, so you don't have to be a Syrian student to view these pages. We have an entry point for universities, and we have an entry point for organizations. And when I say organizations, so the thinking behind designing peer was somewhat simple. We really wanted to make sure we were able to connect the students to the learning opportunities that already exist. There have been so many opportunities out there for Syrian students that have not found their audience. So while many scholarship opportunities are flooded with applicants, many in our research we found are unable to even find enough applicants to select a scholarship winner. And secondly, we wanted to meet the need. So there were a couple of things we considered when we actually implemented the project and the website. The first thing was in the region surrounding Syria. And we found that, or we heard feedback that many Syrian students are in reality using mobile devices to go online. Desktops are becoming less and less relevant. We also recognized and learned that many displaced students are working within a very low bandwidth, and that means cellular and also Wi-Fi. Maybe internet is only available for a certain amount of time. Maybe the network is 2G versus 4G or what have you. But in any event, we wanted to make sure that there were very quick loading times. The app, at one point we had considered creating an app, but we have nixed that idea, which I'll get into. But for now, there is no app download required. It simply would require too much data for a student typically. And we felt that as the site was well designed for the mobile phone, it really would have been redundant. Next, I will say that the and we hope in the coming year that we will, sorry for the background noise. Sorry about that. It's a fire drill, not a real fire, I assure you. So I'm going to keep going. Next, we wanted to make sure that the site was multilingual, and at launch, we've only had the site in English. Website, and I will get into that in more detail when I show you the demo. So some of the site statistics, there have been 20,000 peer users in the last 7 days. We've had 1.2 million unique users since March of 2000. Was about 150,000. We've had 7.2 million hits since the launch. We have a pretty average bounce rate of 47%. We, students or users of the site average about 2 minutes and 24 seconds, and that includes an average that is brought down by a half bounce rate. So I think while these numbers are impressive. Oh, sorry.
We're having some issues with your audio. I wonder if we could have you either dial in or have you have the WebEx call your phone, because your audio gets very choppy and it sometimes is a little hard to follow you.
Okay, very good. Let me dial into the phone. Bear with me one moment.
Okay, no problem. And Leila, while we're waiting for Catherine to connect back up, anything you want to talk about in terms of the background between how you connected up with Catherine and IIE?
Absolutely. So one of the challenges that we've heard from displaced youth is access not only to the educational opportunities, but also full opportunities to actually not just skills training opportunities, but actually opportunities to go to college and to learn specific content like language learning. The other thing that Catherine and I have been talking about is opportunities to actually expand this database to include other types of opportunities like challenges and competitions. Again, that number of organizations and programs are interested in making available to the displaced population. So it's something that Catherine will touch on later in the presentation. One of the questions that we have here, as Catherine noted, this is focusing on the Syrian refugees or those that are displaced either within Syria or outside of Syria. But it is a very interesting model where they've used a technology to build something that is right now in English, but also in Arabic, and they're continuing to source different opportunities for Syrian population specifically, but it doesn't mean that those of you who are working, let's say, in Africa and serving specifically, let's say, Sudanese refugees or Somali refugees couldn't use the same model, the same approach to make these resources, so scholarships, internships, language learning opportunities, visible and accessible to the populations that you're serving. So without saying too much before Catherine gets into it, especially given that the demo will really clarify how this works and also how simple it is for somebody very quickly on their phone to search and find the opportunity that is really tailored to their needs.
Great. Thank you, Leila. Is everybody able to hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, please.
Very good. Thank you. Sorry about that. So I just want to reiterate the last thing I was saying, which is that we've had a high number of users. We've had, as I mentioned, 7.2 million hits. We've had 1.2 million unique users since March 2017. which is, in one hand, a success, but on the other hand, speaks to the very dire need to expand opportunities for displaced students at the higher education level. So I will turn to the next slide. A bit more about the demographics. Most of our users are between 18 and 34 years old, with the age range 25 to 34 actually outpacing 18 to 24, which is what we typically think of when we think of a university student. Again, another indicator that we need more opportunities for students who are perhaps considered non-traditional. 28% of users are female, while 72% are male. That's problematic, given that around the world, the global average is something close to 50% of college attendees are female. The site has been accessed from 214 countries around the world. In the first 2 months, the top hitting countries were Syria, Turkey, Jordan, Lebanon, and Germany. That has now changed. We've gone, I guess you might say, viral in a few locations we never anticipated, one of which is India. And lastly, of course, most people are accessing the site through their mobile devices. So now I will share the screen very quickly to give a demo of the website itself. Here you'll see the entry point for IIE Peer. So if you're a displaced student, and let's say you're a displaced Syrian student, then you would select student. Again, anybody can navigate to any of the pages within the site. We have no high barriers to use. We wanted to keep the barrier to use very low for several reasons, which I'll expound upon in just a moment. So if you're a student, you can click here, Find Opportunities. Let's see, is everybody able to see? Okay, so if you're a student, you can find opportunities by clicking here, or you can click to resources. Resources are various types of resources about how to apply to university and so forth. This is a search page, so if you're a student, you can see right now there are 653 opportunities viewed, listed here, but if you want to search specifically for scholarships, it's important to select that. You choose the country in which you wish to study. I won't now. And you can also select the degree type that you are seeking. Additionally, we also have a keyword search, so I'll filter just for scholarship opportunities that are in there currently, and I'll select the first one as an example. We see the deadline is easy to see. There's a quick descriptor, and then you can see what type of degree type it is for, the country where the opportunity exists. It is coincidence that this one is the U.S. Many are not, most are not. And the deadline, as I mentioned. And then if you want more opportunity, you can either share it or you can click more information, which will lead you directly to the direct website for further information. So as you can see, we tried to very, very much simplify the process. If you're a university or an organization, the entry points are very similar. So I'm going to
I guess these are the challenges of having a webinar during some fire drills, and I guess we'll bear with Catherine for a second while she gets back and her fire drill is over.
Hi, Frederick, I'm back.
Good.
Sorry about that. So I'll move on. The fire drill is complete. So if you're an organization or a university and you have opportunities for Syrian students or any displaced student, even currently, it doesn't have to be one just for a Syrian student, displaced or refugee students, please feel free to go to this entry point, either you're in a university, which is clear-cut, or any other organization, as I mentioned, a business, what have you, a nonprofit, however, and you can click organizations. And if you want to view the other organizations in the site, you can see here we have a long list of a directory, which will be expanded soon to enable a keyword search, so that if you have interest in looking for a network that did work similar to yours or perhaps complementary to yours, you could very easily find that. So I'm going to go back to the Universities Connect page and hit Sign On to Peer. Now, there's a very simple sign-on form where you can post your opportunity. First, you submit your university itself. Then we will vet that you are not a profit university, let's say, but rather a university or a legitimate organization with a great opportunity to submit. So once we've done that, you'll get a notice, and then you can submit the information about the opportunity. Will all be posted to our website, and it is really as simple as that. So thank you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and go back to the slides. Actually, apologies. I do just want to bring up the Arabic version of the site, which I'm proud to say launched last Friday. I won't attempt to navigate it as I'm not an Arabic speaker, but you can see here it is all equal to the site in English. And now I will stop sharing. So that more or less is the demo. I encourage everyone to click around, have a look at the site, check out the resources page. We have resources specific to universities, organizations, and then specific to students. So more interestingly, I think, are the challenges and the lessons we've learned over the past year. And we have been a up and running program for about a year now. One of the biggest challenges has been how to maintain the website. You know, there are other databases that exist out there, but a common problem is they either aren't up to date, opportunities have gone past their due dates, or they're simply sort of left out there to wilt, I guess I would say. And so that's been something that we consciously decided to set Peer apart and to make it as useful as possible for students, that we would employ at least 1 to 2 people who will keep the site current. That is not their full-time job, but it is something we're very grateful for, as they do opportunity research, we call it. And frankly, a lot of that is Google searching, and other parts of that is more nuanced. As we get into deeper connections with other partners and organizations who lead us to more or yet more opportunities to populate the database with. One of the largest challenges we're facing at the moment is actually the ability to monitor student success. When we set up this platform, what we aimed to do was keep a low barrier to use. We know there are other platforms with similar ideas that actually require a login, personal information, and so forth. But we just didn't feel like we possessed enough resources to really consider that protection risk. We didn't want to make anyone's personal identifiable information available, you know, barring data breach, so forth. We also wanted to make sure that the site really was open to as many people as possible. Another reason I think we can say proudly we've had over 1 million unique users. The problem with that, however, is that we're being asked a question which might be on all of your minds, which is how many of these students using the site have actually managed to get to university by way of a peer opportunity. And that is something I cannot answer right now. At best, in the future, we'll be able to estimate based on surveys and other means of data collection. But tracking the students who go through the site and then end up applying to university is very difficult. But what we can do, as I've noted, is collect impact stories. And impact stories are already telling us a great deal about the weaknesses, perhaps, of the site, but also its strengths. So the impact stories, as they say, have impact, and that's meant a great deal to us as we share the site with others. And I'll read one of those quotes a bit later on. And then the other challenge is that we realize and we recognize there's a bias right now to those opportunities that are in the English language. As our team was researching primarily English-speaking opportunities, within the coming weeks, we'll have an native Arabic speaker member of our team who will be working very hard to populate the database with opportunities that might only be able to be identified in Arabic or taught in Arabic. I'm just going to read this quote. This is a student and scholarship recipient who found an opportunity through Peer. She writes, "For an average person who is living in a peaceful country, being accepted in a scholarship is a life-changing experience. It is an opportunity to make dreams come true. For a person like me who is living in a war-torn country and whose passport is only accepted in very few countries in the world, it is not an exaggeration to say that being accepted in a scholarship is like achieving the impossible. IIE made every dream possible and achievable for me." very kind words about IIE, but as the student, it's probably evident, she really got herself to that scholarship. And so it's important to us to have the voice of the student and it to not be either a New York-centric project or one that comes from the top down. So I welcome any suggestions or comments of ways to involve students more in the platform than we have yet. So that's just an aside. A few things about the timeline. So we have some exciting new initiatives within Peer that are coming to light soon. One of which is that we will be launching a best practices conference within the next 2 years. I believe it won't be 2018, but rather 19 that we have our first. We'll be gathering both students and anyone interested in the field of education emergencies, as well as experts in the field, together to discuss best practices and to really put our minds together. We will also roll out a more comprehensive search feature soon. The directory, as I mentioned, will be expanded. So in the directory, if you're an NGO, for example, and you want to find an NGO also working in the space specifically of higher education emergencies, for example, there will be a keyword search, and then you can read a full comprehensive description of the organization's mission. That is in the works and should be rolled out within this coming year. A very large portion of the project has yet to launch, and that is the advising services. So year one of the project, we were spending our time researching different means of conducting and unveiling the global advising services. Global advising services will be a means for students to gain help and access to an advisor who can help them actually apply to university. It is to fill that gap between when a student decides they want to go and between when, hopefully, they're able to enroll. So it really is support throughout the application process. There isn't quite enough time here to discuss all the ideas and the ways we plan to implement, as it'll be a learning, there will be a learning curve, there will be many changes along the way. But we will be launching within this coming year 2 to 3 pilot programs, which will be likely concentrated, one in Turkey, helping students in Turkey apply to Turkish universities. There will be one, again, I say likely, in the UK, and we'll also start out attempting to try out the virtual component of the advising services in the US. But again, we're open to suggestions and ideas and any connections to those who are already in the field doing the great work that we really hope to leverage would be wonderful. Lastly, in the future, we hope to launch more in-depth research and create more resources for students and universities alike. So one of the things we'll do is that in year 2, we'll commence our year 3, we will commence more in-depth research studies. However, this coming year, which marks year 2, we're going to focus on the qualitative study through the collection of student stories. This would help produce a white paper, and we'll focus on the needs of displaced students studying at university, which we aim and hope to disseminate more broadly online and in conference settings. In turn, this, we hope, will lead to a resource for students themselves who are new to university, and also for teachers and educators alike. We found many times over that a lot of the resources, particularly those related to psychosocial needs, are not available for students at the tertiary level, but rather they are widely available at the primary and secondary level, as much focus has been on the lower grade levels as far as education emergency work goes. So we, once again, we found lots of programs, guides, so forth, resources for psychosocial concerns, but we've yet to find something that is specific just to displaced students at the higher education level. Again, once again, I want to say this is, I hope, interactive, and so again, if anybody does know of resources that exist that might serve as a guide or just be a helpful place to start, by all means, feel free to share. And I will share my email at the end of this presentation. Lastly, I just want to ask for all of your help. I know I've done it a few times already in this presentation, but we hope that you're able to support peer. We ask for your help as far as if you do know of opportunities or scholarship opportunities, maybe they're an online or language learning opportunity, feel free to go to our site and enter it, and do so as soon as you're able. We'll post that right away to our peer database, and it can be easily searched. We found there's been great success in making little-known opportunities or scholarships available to broad audiences of students who wouldn't otherwise know of, say, a scholarship in Japan, let's say. The other thing is that we highly encourage, if you're part of a university system or perhaps even your company is interested in the field of higher education emergencies, we highly recommend that you encourage your university organization or company to offer scholarships themselves for displaced students. Nothing keeps a child in school longer than knowing that they have opportunities beyond the secondary level. So it's not just a higher education alone, but rather higher education, in our opinion, and also in our research, can help sustain the length of time a student is in school, period. Please share your ideas for collaboration and partnership across organizations, yours, ours, those that you know, all of them. And we encourage the use of peer across organizational networks among colleagues and students, point students in the direction of our site. Lastly, here is my contact. Again, my name is Catherine Miller. Feel free to send me a direct email. We do have a general inbox, but always appreciate, I know, emailing a person. So I would be happy to be in direct touch for any topic. And that, I believe, concludes the presentation. Please do follow us on social media. IIE Peer is our Facebook page, as well as Twitter. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Catherine. So there are a few questions, and as I'm actually going through them, if all of you could take time to add additional questions in the chat window, and we'll get to as many as possible. So the first question is about anyone else, either on this call or the broader community, being able to take your specific approach and the technology that you built to the database and use it to create a similar resource for students from other regions. We have a participant, for example, from Africa. So if you can speak to that.
Sure, absolutely. So I had mentioned that for the year one of this program, which we're sort of wrapping up now, or will be in March, we focused the platform for displaced Syrian students. In the second year, so after March, we're going to start to open up the database, given that it is already translated into Arabic, to other populations of displaced students within the MENA, the Middle East, North African region. That's not to say that everyone speaks Arabic, but we will also expand the translations of the site to other languages. We're considering and talking about that now. And this is a 5-year plan we have, but in years 4 and 5, what we really hope to do is open up the platform for all refugee or displaced students. That means a very, very broad database that has opportunities for any students interested from anywhere in the world, victims of any conflict or simply having had to move. That said, we're really interested, and I say this very genuinely, in partnering and working with other organizations that wish to do similar work. We aren't filling the gap. We aren't meeting the needs this very moment for say, opportunities for students in the African continent. So we would love the conversation and happy to be help anyone who has an idea of where to start. I hope that answers that question. Thank you.
Yep, great. Thanks, Catherine. Great to hear. And Frederick has shared with everyone in the chat window Catherine's email in case you are more interested in what's coming in the next couple of years. So the next question is about the criteria that you're taking into account when approving universities, organizations, or scholarship program submissions to the platform. So when you think about quality certification protection issues, if you can say more about how you're, what criteria you're using and what the process looks like and how long it takes.
The turnaround, so I believe what you're referring to, or the question is referring to, is the question of if, say, you have an opportunity and you wish to submit it, and perhaps you represent a university or an organization, how long is that turnaround time from when we have a look, vet the opportunity, and then post it to peer? I will say quickly that that just depends. It's usually a fairly quick turnaround. We acknowledged early on we aren't, the bulk of our opportunities in the site are actually from our own research rather than the submissions of other organizations. So that said, there's a benefit, which is that we can really turn around that process. I myself don't do the vetting, so I can't speak to every element of it, but I will say, in truth, it's not very heavy vetting. We make sure that if it's a university, say, we've gotten some opportunities that are for-profit. We also know that not in every country is it, we're more familiar with a Western-based system where for-profit universities might have some concerns, raise some issues, but we're also aware that in other countries that may be the way of it. So we really take it on a case-by-case basis, same with the organizations. Happy to answer any questions, though, if anybody wants to send an email wondering whether they qualify for the peer database.
Okay, and that's great. And actually a related question is around, are you prioritizing some of the distance learning opportunities, like MBA online, for example, or in person, or it's both at this point?
Yeah, it really is both at this point. We're really excited about the online opportunities that are out there, and that more and more online opportunities are working with brick and mortar universities to make sure that their certificates, or rather the diplomas, transfer and are certified. So we do look for certified programs when it comes to scholarships, but that's not to say some are non-degree programs, and we recognize that many online programs presently are for non-degree. But we're very excited anytime there's a collaboration, and we certainly are looking to the future of how online learning might help many displaced students, not just Syrians. That said, we aren't going in any one direction or the other at the moment.
Thank you. Do you plan to add employment-related opportunities, such as internships and summer jobs or similar?
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot. Currently, we don't have the bandwidth. We're a small team. We haven't posted job opportunities. I don't think that we will ever post job opportunities, but one thing we are considering is grant opportunities, posting competition. I know that was raised, and thank you for that in conversations in the past. So we're talking about that actively. We're talking about adding resources such as counseling services that a student could search for in their region, and perhaps be connected to, let's say a counselor online or offline, and so forth. But at present, we know it's a very large issue. We're very aware of the need to turn higher education into an employable career. We don't yet have the answer for that.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you. Speaking of counseling or mentoring, so you talked about mentoring specifically on the application process. Will you be looking at mentoring on specific topics like language, for example?
Right now, the mentoring services that we're hoping to unveil in the coming years, and hopefully sooner rather than later, will be really focused on helping that student get to university. So really the application process. And sometimes secondary to that, we realize that if it's a one-on-one relationship, let's say, mentoring and advising can take many different forms. So there's no limit really, but what our guidelines will really help do is really create a framework for helping that student apply to university. And from there, I think there's great possibility. I also just want to say on that note, while we want to, in a couple years, make sure we have advising services available to most every student who might want it, either virtually, maybe in small instances in person. To start, we are starting with smaller pilot projects. So we really are looking for partners with that, And if you know of or you are working on any type of advising or mentoring programs, also do get in touch.
Great, and we have a question actually from Eliud in Africa. Frederick, are you able to unmute him?
Sure, we could try that. The question is also in chat. He has a question regarding the application for students who are in Africa. Go ahead, Eliud. I'm not sure if we can hear him. He's unmuted.
Yep, okay. Catherine, so Eliud is asking regarding application for students who are in Africa. Does that give you enough context, or do you need more details about from Eliud?
No, I hope I'm able to answer a question, which is that students who are in Africa are absolutely welcome to have a look at the database now. We say we target Syrian students, which is to say that our outreach really does apply mostly to Syrian students. That's not to say that every opportunity in our database is only for Syrian students. So you heard it here first. If there's any interest you might have and you are a student or know of students in Africa, do have a look at the database. There are definitely opportunities available to all refugee or displaced students.
Thank you. So you mentioned that this was early days for your service, for the database. Do you have some of the stories to share about how partners are doing potentially creative things with your platform, or how you're envisioning this being used by, let's say, global NGOs like the IRC on the ground, or some of the local NGOs? In order for the young people to, number one, know that these opportunities are available, number two, be able to effectively take advantage of what's available to them. So if you can talk through less direct to students, but more through the organizations that are working very closely with the displaced youth in the region.
Sure. So if I understand correctly, I think that one of the goals are myriad in this case, and for our project, and we are in the early days, as you mentioned. So right now the focus has been simply on getting the word. Typically the flow of information has been from IIE peer to other NGOs, large and small, to hope that and ask that they get the word out to the students so that the students themselves might use the platform. I think that as we grow as a program and we have more diversity of services and the platform really becomes more like a home, as a digital home, if you will, then there will be a feedback loop, and we might be able to be in closer touch with the students themselves and so forth. As for collaboration, I think that, I mentioned the directory, and the directory in some ways is just a very small piece, but I think that one problem we're finding is that a lot of the very large INGOs or organizations are unaware of some of the activities happening at the community-based level. And so I hope, and we hope, that in the future one can more easily find actors in the field, both large and small. And if they come together, I think we need not take credit. I think that if one organization is working with another in a great partnership outside of the scope of peer, we think that's wonderful.
Great, thank you so much, Catherine. I think we have covered very efficiently a whole set of questions. Of course, if there are any other questions, please feel free to email them to us. You have Catherine's email in the chat window, and we'll be sending that as part of our recap. Catherine, is there anything else just based on these questions and obviously your presentation that you wanted to share with this group before we go into the final webinar poll?
Yeah, I only want to reiterate that I think one of the things that we hope will set our project apart is the broad reach. And I don't mean just by student population, but I do mean by helping to catalyze the work, the really wonderful work that is already existent in the broader global community for displaced students caught in education emergencies. In that that we acknowledge that work is already taking place, wonderful work, and I think that's the overarching goal of PEER, is to really leverage and raise up that work so that more of it happens collectively, and also that ultimately more students are reached. So I think that concludes everything. Thank you very much for hosting me on this platform.
Absolutely, and I would just also really emphasize what Catherine said, and this is something that is the approach from the task force too, is this notion of collective impact, so working together to pull together all the resources that exist, and then also using technology where needed to ensure that there is scale and that we also have evidence-based approach, as Catherine shares some of the data points that help the organization learn and iterate around the user needs. So Frederick has posted in the window, so if you can take next 8 minutes that we're giving back to you, if you can take time to share with us your feedback. Also, hopefully this conversation has inspired some additional ideas about the questions that you have that you'd like to see covered on these future webinars, or even the programs and solutions that your organization has, or somebody in your network that, again, you think would be worth while sharing on these webinars. So please email that to me, or actually we'll keep the chat window open, so you're welcome to share that in the chat window. And thank you all for taking the time to join us this morning. Apologies for a little bit of the technical difficulties earlier. We will be sharing the recording of the webinar, and then also Seth will be putting together a recap post, which you're welcome to, again, share more broadly with your network. So the recording and the PowerPoint will be available by the end of the day today, and then we will be sending a recap post in the next couple of weeks. Thanks again, and please do take time to provide feedback. Thank you, Catherine, for taking the time to join the webinar this morning.
Thank you, Catherine and Leila, and again, apologize a little bit for the poor quality today. I'm going to leave the session open now for a few minutes for people to finish up potentially answering the questions for the webinar poll in the multimedia viewer or the link that I just posted. I will, at this point, stop the recording.